Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Joe's Hot Takes 25. This is a podcast where we dig into the facts, challenge the myths, and get to the truth. We ask a lot of questions here. No opinions. This is a questions. Get you thinking. I'll ask the questions. Let's provoke the thoughts. I'm your host. I'm Joe. Today, let's talk about something that affects every single one of us. Everybody's affected by this. It's nutrition. Advertisers will have you believe that their product is the healthy, low-fat, low-sugar alternative to everything else out there. Well, that's interesting. Like I've said before, it's very important to verify information because, after all, knowledge is power. So my question today is, how do we really know what is healthy and what is not? Well, let's break it down. Segment number 1 of this podcast is the rotten truth about fresh food. So, one of the best analogies I've ever heard was this. If food starts to rot after a few days, it's healthy to eat. Now, of course, not saying eat rotting food, but think about it. Real food is perishable. It ripens, it ages, and eventually goes bad. That's a sign that it's natural. And it hasn't been pumped full of preservatives or chemicals. Interesting. Let's talk about fruits and veggies. So we all assume that store-bought fruits and veggies are healthy, right? Well, maybe not. Let's compare some store-bought versus homegrown produce. The first thing is we can jump right into the freshness of this, right? So homegrown produce is picked at peak ripeness. We figure out when do we want to pull this fruit and we pick it, or this produce. Now, store-bought produce, it may have been sitting in a warehouse or a store for days, even weeks. So a lot of this fruit and vegetables is treated with things to help it stay fresh or not rot as quickly. So the nutrients, let's talk about that. The vitamins and the minerals, they start to break down the moment the produce is harvested, right? So as soon as that produce is taken off of its vine and it's no longer living, it starts to break down. So the longer the journey, the less fresh the food. So right now, today, we're talking about tariffs that President Trump has put on Mexico, Canada, China. But specifically, let's talk about Mexico, because the outcry here is, well, we get the majority of our avocados from Mexico. All right. So do we want these avocados that have been picked, they've been harvested, they've been put in a truck, they've been transported, then they've either been put on rail or moved to crated and then moved to transportation vehicles. Then they're brought into the United States. From there, different routes. Some routes will go into California. Some routes will go farther to the east. Some of these may be shipped on ships rather than trucking. Some flown, but I think you get the point. This crop is harvested, and then it takes weeks, probably in some cases, to get to us. So is that good, fresh, wholesome food? I don't know. Maybe it's better if we grow it here. Now, I know avocados are interesting. Not everywhere is avocado friendly. I know we do grow a lot in California. My wife and I have a house in Puerto Rico, and we are graced with 2 avocado trees, aguacate. It's Dominican style, so they're the big avocados. Oh, they're delicious. But I digress. So that transportation, that's an issue. The longer that journey, the less fresh the food. And then let's talk about the farming practices. So the local small scale farming, they often use better soil and fewer chemicals. And I'm going to get into seeds and stuff like that here in a little bit. But they use, they try to, a lot of these farm to table advertisers try to stay away from pesticides and chemicals and things like that and use more natural ways. Here's an interesting, and this is not fruit, but I've heard that with roses in particular, that'll get a lot of those aphids, those little bugs all over them. That a trick is to plant garlic or onions in between those plants, because the garlic and the onions are natural repellents for these type of bugs. So they don't like to get around the garlic and the onion, so they stay away from the roses. So there's ways to do it. Now, as we talk about that, we kind of roll into pesticides. So, store-bought produce is often sprayed with chemicals. They do that to keep the bugs away, and like I mentioned just a moment ago, it helps the fruit or vegetable last a little bit longer, because it has to be transported, that it has to be taken off of the trucks, it has to be placed in the supermarket, and then hopefully sold quickly. Otherwise, it'll start going bad in the supermarket. Excuse me. All right. So what are some other benefits of homegrown food? Well, you control the quality. When you grow your own food at home, and I know it's a lot of work, folks. My wife and I had a beautiful little garden in Puerto Rico. It was great, but yes, it is a lot of work, but oh my goodness. You realize what fresh lettuce, fresh cucumber, fresh green beans, when they're coming right off of the vine or right out of the ground, and washed off in the sink, there's no pesticides, you rinse them off and you eat it, and the flavor, if you've never had fresh homegrown, try it. Go to the local farmer's market, try some fresh stuff, and you'll understand where I'm coming from here. The other thing about homegrown is you get a better variety. For instance, our little garden, we had 3 different types of lettuce. We had arugula, we had romaine, and I can't remember the other one. But we had 3 different types. Excuse me, I don't edit the podcast, so I'm sorry for my coughing. So anyway, yeah, you get a better variety, and then you can decide how you want to fertilize and protect your food. So like I said, what an eye-opening experience when you grow your own food. The taste is better, the quality is better, and honestly, it's rewarding to eat something that you planted yourself. I grew this, and now I'm harvesting it, and now I'm eating it, and it's, wow, what a great feeling. So that's a real thing. So if what I've just talked about, if that's not enough to get you thinking about how fresh is the foods that we're eating, how about the GMO seeds versus natural seeds? So a lot of these mass producers are using genetically modified or GMO seeds. Those are developed in many cases, by the company Monsanto. So these are often engineered for herbicide resistance, while natural seeds, which refer to non-GMO seeds that are naturally occurring and are not altered in a lab, allow for farmers to save and replant them from their harvest without restriction. The key difference is that with, for instance, Monsanto seed, they are patented. They come with restrictions on seed saving, whereas the natural seeds provide the freedom for farmers to reproduce their crops, and they're not genetically modified. They're real seeds, natural seeds. So here's some key points about these modified seeds. These seeds are genetically modified to possess traits like herbicide resistance. So instead of having to spray the crop, the seed is grown it's modified in the lab so that as that plant grows, it will, because of the genetic modification, act as a herbicide resistance. Now, the other problem is you have, due to their patented nature, because again, these are genetically manufactured seeds. They're grown in a lab, they're developed in a lab, so they're patented. Farmers often cannot save their seeds from a modified crop and then use the seed again. So that requires the farmers to have to buy new seeds every year. So they have to buy a brand new set of seeds. That keeps the companies in business. But then what does that give us, right? It gives us genetically modified seeds, not natural. So critics argue that GMOs can negatively impact the biodiversity, contribute to herbicide overuse, and raise concerns about long-time environmental and health effects. We don't really know what these genetically modified seeds are going to do to our human bodies. So, I always try to think back, like, wow, what were people doing, 200-300 years ago? And I know that we live longer today and we've had advances in technology and things like that. But man, just get back to the basics of eating good food. I love it. It's great. If you haven't done it, if you haven't tried it, try it. Try some fresh stuff. You'll thank me probably. So again, these farmers, they have to buy the seed. They cannot reuse the seed. And then we have no idea what the long-term effects are of these GMOs. So what about a natural seed? Natural seeds, they're obviously not genetically modified. They're considered heirloom. Heirloom varieties, those are seeds that are traditionally grown and passed down through generations. So that's kind of cool. You're passing these seeds down and you're growing crop off of the same seeds that your parents, maybe even your grandparents used. So there's something just very nostalgic and meaningful about that. And obviously, you get to save your seeds, right? You get to save them from your natural crop so you can replant in the future. You don't have to go out and buy more seeds. And again, the organic farming, when you're doing it at home, what a difference. And you're avoiding the GMOs, you're avoiding synthetic chemicals, you're avoiding these things. So it kind of goes back, the original question here was, do we really know what is healthy and what is not in our produce? And maybe we don't. So I'm just throwing some information out. I do a lot of research to try to get some information and pose the questions. And so I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not even going to give you my opinion, other than the fact that I can give you my opinion that fresh grown produce is amazing. But beyond that, that's up to you to think about and decide on your own. Well, let's jump into segment number 2. Let's talk about the grocery store layout trick. This is pretty cool. My wife, Melinda, is a health coach, and she gave me this tip. Only shop the outside walls of the grocery store. Now, I think other people have heard that, and you've probably heard that. And at first I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. If I don't have to go in the middle, I can sure save time by just zipping around the outside edge there. But I really thought it through, and you know what? She's absolutely right. The outside walls have what? Think about your grocery store. The fresh fruits and veggies on the outside walls. Baked goods, fresh baked goods, outside walls. Dairy products, outside walls. Meats and cheeses, outside walls. And what do we find on the inner aisles? We find the processed foods. We find the saturated and supersaturated foods of chips, cookies, frozen meals, sugary cereals, sodas. Wow. So we want to try to work the outside edge of the store. And then I feel like when I walk in the store and I work the outside edges and I'm only grabbing some fresh bread. They always are selling the artisan loaves of bread. The eggs, the milk. The lunch meats are there. All these meats. The butcher's there. So I think, wow, this is good. I'm getting fresh stuff, fresh and healthy. So does that rule really hold up? Well, let's test it. Let's look at segment number 3 and let's talk about the lunch meat myth. So lunch meats, interesting. They are on the exterior wall of the store generally. So then we would think these must be healthy, right? Because they're on the outside walls. Well, not so fast. Not so fast. Processed foods, lunch meat is one that is highly processed, meaning it's cured, smoked, or pre-sliced, and often added with preservatives. They've put things in that meat to keep it looking the way it does and having a longer shelf life and a better presentation for a longer period of time. Excuse me. These meats are generally high in sodium and saturated fat. So too much sodium equals increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, low in nutrients. So a lot of times these lunch meats that we see, they look delicious and they taste delicious. It's a protein source, but it's lacking in essential vitamins, minerals, and fiber. So don't think that, if I just eat all this lunch meat, I'm going to get all these good, healthy things added to my diet. Not necessarily true. Now, what about the contamination risks? Well, processed meats are linked to higher risks of different types of cancers and heart disease. Why? Well, because processed meats are touched a lot. They're touched by humans, they're touched by machines, they're packaged, they're transported, they're touched a lot, and a lot of things are added to them. Just take a look at the ingredients labels sometimes, and you'll be surprised at some of the things that you'll see in there. So, but if you go to the deli counter, now keep in mind, a lot of those deli meats, those are processed meats. Those are processed, just like the packaged meats. But you can opt for leaner cuts like turkey or chicken breast. Just limit maybe how often you eat it. I think you got to be careful having a sandwich every day, loading it up with these meats that taste so good. And I grew up on it. So, it's hard sometimes to go, I grew up on that, but now I think I'm going to back out of it a little bit. So kind of limit what you eat and always pair it with whole foods. You have to get in those fresh veggies, whole grain bread, things like that. There are some things if you want to really consider diet, look at some plant-based alternatives like tofu or lentils. But the bottom line is this: just because it's on the outside walls, it doesn't automatically make it healthy. Let's jump into segment number 4, fresh baked goods. Are they healthy or not healthy? Fresh baked. Interesting. Well, let's talk bread. We'll talk bread. You might think that fresh baked goods are a better option than packaged ones. But here's the reality. Many grocery store breads still contain preservatives. Like, I'm probably going to mispronounce some of these things. Calcium propionate, potassium sorbate. Those are chemicals that are added to extend shelf life so that bread can sit there a little bit longer. If you bake fresh bread at home that uses only a few ingredients, going all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, that bread, how long will it sit on your counter? Not long. After several days, you'll start developing some mold. It'll start to mold up because it's fresh. It doesn't have preservatives to stay off the process of breaking down. You'll find additives like citric acid and sorbic acid. You'll find artificial ingredients like high fructose corn syrup and dextrose. Wow. I mean, when it's things that you really can't pronounce, I don't know if I want to eat those. So here's a question. How can I make, or how can you make a better choice? Look for artisan breads. They have fewer ingredients. Read those labels on the back. They'll give you a good idea of how many ingredients are in there. And when you see a list of things that you really can't pronounce or you don't know what it is, well, I personally would probably want to stay away from it. Buy from a local bakery or a farmer's market. You're going to get fresh. Consider baking your own bread. Sourdough is a great option. So my wife, I'm going to dub her now the sourdough queen. She makes sourdough bread, sourdough English muffins, sourdough pretzel rolls, sourdough cookies, sourdough pancakes. Yeah, I could go on for hours here. But the beauty is they're all fresh ingredients. And bless her heart, she sprinkles in a little extra love. So not only are they healthy, but they just taste good, make you feel good. You just want to eat it. But be careful. You can overeat that bread too. Well, I'm going to jump in now to segment number 5, the big picture. What can we do? So what's the takeaway here? Well, we need to start questioning what we're told about food. It's okay. We can ask these questions. And just because something is labeled healthy doesn't really mean that it is. And processed food companies and advertisers will tell us what we want to hear. It's not necessarily the truth. It's interesting. I watched a program that talked about chickens. And it was interesting that the packaging on chicken, like frozen chicken or packaged chicken, the packaging will say no hormones, or no hormones used or no hormones added. And it was interesting, this program I watched, that they talked about that, and they said, well, yeah, of course there's no hormones added, because they've been prohibited from doing that, the growers, since the 70s. So they're telling the truth, but they're misleading us by making us think, oh, I'm going to buy this chicken brand because it's better than the other chicken brand because they don't use hormones or antibiotics in their chickens. Another interesting thing is, and look this one up, cage free. When I hear cage free chicken, I think, oh, these chickens are just running around out in the field, like in Wyoming where I grew up, right? Where we had chickens and they were just outside kind of running around, and you kept them in a somewhat of an area where you could find the eggs and whatnot. But no, not at all. Not at all. A lot of this poultry is raised in these big barns, and they'll have open door at one end and a little area where the chickens, if they choose, can go outside, and that allows them to be called free range. And well, the chickens, most of these chickens, they grow so fast, they're so genetically modified that they can't even walk, a lot of them. So do yourself a favor if you want. Look at some of these programs and read up and learn about it. It's always good to do research. The knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. I say that in every podcast almost. So if we want to take more control over nutrition, here's a couple tips. Smart shopper, right? Stick to the whole foods as much as you can. If you can meal prep, I'd say take a few hours each week to cook real homemade food. And for goodness sakes, read the labels. If you can't pronounce an ingredient, maybe don't eat it. If you can grow your own food, oh, wow. Even if it's just a few potted plants, that can make a big difference. And of course, and you've heard this time and time again, avoid these processed sugars. We in our household use a lot of natural sweeteners like monk fruit or honey we'll use. versus refined sugars and things like that. Now, so we're all busy. We're all busy, but taking a few small steps, it can make a big difference in how we live and how we eat, how we feel, and how we move through our day. So I hope I got you asking the question: how do we really know what is healthy and what is not? And I wanted to throw some information out there for everybody, and just give you a chance to have a little conversation down the road, and encourage a little critical thinking without being too technical. But yeah. So, folks, thanks for visiting. That's going to end the episode of today for Joe's Hot Takes 25. Thanks for tuning in. You can check us out. We'll be on YouTube. You can always leave a comment. And, if you decide to start growing your own food, or baking your own bread and breaking it, your own bread, we'd love to hear about it. Let us know. So until next time, stay healthy, stay informed, always stay curious. And as they say in Puerto Rico, when it comes to eating, buen provecho.